So, I'll be quick about this, but before we get into today's video, I just want to thank you guys for all of the support on the merch so far. I've been blown away by the reception so far, and if you want to pick some up, you can get it in the link in the description. Alright, let's do this. I've talked before about how much of a shame it is that DLC tends to be forgotten about in videos like mine. In the same way that sequels often refine a game's formula and become fan favorites, it's not too uncommon for DLC to surpass the base game in a lot of ways. Two of my favorite examples of this are The Knife of Dunwall and The Brigmore Witches, the two narrative DLC for the first Dishonored game. Anyone who's been watching for long enough knows that I absolutely love the first Dishonored game. It's one of those games that's like a second home to me, where I'm so familiar with it that I can kind of play it like a piano on a good day. I don't even want to think about how many playthroughs I've done. Everything from no right clicks to be detected by every enemy, to no reloading saves, to use a ton of hacks with a cheat engine. I've put this game through the ringer, but even with that said, the DLC for this game still blows the base game out of the water in my book. There's a whole lot to talk about in Dishonored. These definitely won't be my last videos on the game. Really, each mission could have its own essay dedicated to it, but for now, let's talk about the three missions in this first piece of DLC, The Knife of Dunwall, in which you play as the assassin Daud, who killed the Empress of Dunwall. Daud is walking a fine line. After the murder of Empress Jessamine, Daud saw Corvo's dead eyes and knew that he would pay for this one. He realized as he left Dunwall Tower that he only had a few short months to redeem himself, to recognize that he's too powerful to use his skills for greedy purposes. He knows that Corvo's coming for him, and all he can hope to do is find some way to erase a bit of the bad he's done before his encounter with Corvo. Fortunately, the outsider sees this new, remorseful side of Daud and offers him a chance at redemption in the form of a name.
Delilah.
The first mission, A Captain of Industry, has us breaking into a meat processing plant in search of information on a ship named Delilah. This mission has a whole lot it needs to accomplish in terms of game design. Narratively, it needs to establish a couple of characters, build up the relationship between Daud and his protege, Billy Lurk, and it needs to remind us what life is like in Dunwall, as well as getting us hooked on this new story. However, in terms of gameplay, its requirements are even trickier. As the first mission in the first piece of DLC, it needs to be both challenging to players who are already experienced and remind players how to play the game, as well as introducing all the new items and powers that Daud has access to. Well, that's a lot to unpack, and we are really going in deep here, so let's look at this mission linearly, and take things piece by piece. First things first, we start out in this long corridor, leading us to a view that will immediately remind you why you love Dishonored, and Billy Lurk gives us a bit of intel on the area ahead. There's some sort of a strike going on, and a little bit of industrial sabotage, so the scabs have taken the punch cards from every worker who's with the Union, barring their entry. Then, however, Billy Lurk hands us a rune.
I know you collect these.
This reminds players who maybe haven't played the game for a bit that runes and bone charms are indeed a thing, and it prompts us to open our upgrade menu and take a look at the options, revealing to us in a very natural way that Daud has a couple of powers that Corvo didn't have in the base game. Once we've made our selection, taking the upgrade we want or choosing to hold off on upgrading yet, it's time to move forward. Taking in the scenery around us, we get an immediate reminder of one of the most important aspects of Dishonored's gameplay. The high ground is everything. We do our work from the rooftops. Up here, we can watch what's happening below, overhear conversations, plan out routes, assess threats. From the rooftops, the streets look like a candy shop, and it's up to us to choose which candy we pick up. Well, the only issue is that the enemies have taken the high ground too. They're actually a bit higher up than you are at the start of this, and you have, at best, the high jumping ability, Agility 1, to help you get above them, where you belong. Watching this area, the guard up on top of the catwalk really is a rogue element. When he's inside, he could easily be looking right out towards where you want to blink to. You really don't have the visibility you need to safely blink ahead undetected, so you might be reminded that one of, if not the most important ability in Dishonored was Dark Vision, which allows you to see enemies through walls. We cast Daud's equivalent, Void Gaze, only to find that we still can't see them through walls. Instead, at level 1, it enables us to see runes and bone charms, essentially filling the same role that the heart filled in the base game. Cool, now we've been reacquainted with the basics. High ground is everything, find artifacts using Void Gaze. However, we still don't have an easy way to get to that high ground and pass this first stealth challenge. This one's a bit tricky, as it's the first quote-unquote puzzle in the DLC. It's a simple matter of waiting for this higher guard to turn around and claiming your rightful place at the high ground. However, when you activated Void Gaze, you probably caught that there's a bone charm in this first alleyway. Like this first stealth challenge, getting the bone charm here is all about intel. It doesn't feel safe to enter this room because we can't have Void Gaze 2 yet, and we can't see into the room. However, taking the long way around and wrapping back to the far side of this catwalk, we can see a bit inside, and by the time you get there, you'll have probably caught wind of the guard. Taking him down makes it feel much safer to proceed to the Bone Charm. As I said in my other Dishonored videos, Dishonored is a game about having the high ground and deciding when and where you want to go down to collect things from your quote-unquote candy shop. That is, the more dangerous street level. Moving forward, Billy Lurk appears to tell us about a man watching the refinery from the river, and thanks to clever framing, the next room we go into will almost definitely be Granny Rags' hideout, which introduces a new gimmick for the DLC, Granny Rags' recipes. Granny Rags' first recipe is cryptic, but if you pursue it, you might remember a couple of weepers whose bodies you passed as you navigated the rooftops behind you. Perceptive players can go back and grab the weeper body required for the recipe now, but if you didn't see those bodies, the game will draw your attention to them in a scene that I'll point out later, all while making it much harder to retrieve the bodies. Once again, perceptiveness is rewarded. Anyways, whether you get the weeper corpses now or not, this window acts as a threshold to the rest of the level. Yes, you can get over this gate in a couple of other ways, but that's almost definitely not what you're going to do, thanks to the framing on this second rooftop, and my point stands regardless. Here, you've got a million options. You're past the more linear opening section of the level, and now we've got this huge yard. Each building here acts as its own stealth challenge, and we'll go into those shortly. When spoiled for choice like this, it's only natural to cast Void Gaze and see if there are any runes or bone charms to collect. The two that you see point you to a couple of very important locations throughout the level. One is high up, one is low down. We want to be free in Dishonored, going from rooftop to rooftop, being the badass magic assassin we are, so I think most players will probably go up for the higher one first. Arriving here,
The Slaughterhouse butchers are locking workers in the pump control station by the docks. If you could get in there, I bet the workers would tell you just about anything you wanted to know.
boom, we've got intel. Pump control station by the docks. I guess we'll see where all of these pipes lead to. And there we have it, a cage. Now we've got an objective in mind for how we might get one of those punch cards and get inside the slaughterhouse, but let's go ahead and grab that last bone charm before we get started. Moving towards the dock, this arc pylon makes it very clear that we aren't getting to the water easily, and even if we swam towards the bone charm, what's the deal with that lever? The wire's leading towards the water where we want to go. We better disable that arc pylon. If we follow the cable from the arc pylon, we get to this whale oil receptacle. There are too many windows and nearby guards to risk taking this guy out, so we sneak past him to open the box. But it's locked. So we go back to our high ground where it's safe and see that that same guard has a key on him. So now it's like the game is saying, nice job sneaking past that guard, bet you can't get the key off his belt. Entirely naturally, without so much as a note in the quest log, the challenge has gone up a tier and presented itself clearly. Information is king in Dishonored, and this level delivers it in a downright genius way. There's even a key on this boat if you're really observant, allowing you to skip pickpocketing the guard. Information is king. Anyways, we get the key, we open the box, we remove the whale oil, we flip the lever, and we get the bone charm. And that's when we find another way into the slaughterhouse. Turns out we didn't need the punch card at all, but let's keep looking out here. There's still a lot to explore, and there are a lot of other ways to enter this building that players might stumble upon. Again, I like to look at this view as the game prompting you to try out different isolated stealth challenges to get you re-equipped with the skills you'll need going forward. We've got one room where you'll basically have to take a guard down when his friend turns around and hide the body in time. We've got an area outside of the cages where you'll have to take a guard down in a big open area. We've got this section where you'll need to handle two guards who seem to always be looking at each other, either by waiting for the perfect moment when something blocks their view or distracting them. A challenge of movement, a challenge of subtlety, a challenge of timing, a challenge of situational awareness, and a challenge of environmental utility. If you can pass these 5 challenges without much strife, then boom, you're reacquainted with Dishonored and this first level has done its job. So now we've got a myriad of ways to get into this place, including one that takes advantage of Daud's new ability to freeze time while selecting a blinking location. Now it's time to dig into the interior of the Wathrild Slaughterhouse. This is a fairly unique area for a Dishonored game. Like the Golden Cat bathhouse in the base game, it's an interior that you can get into from multiple points, some high, some low, some near, some far. But unlike that area, it has a strong contrast between wide open areas like the killing floor and cramped areas like the meat locker, and, well, there's something that's been screaming at me over the last few pages of this script. I love going full assault in this game. I've done an entire video about Dishonored's combat. So, how does this level design impact that sort of playstyle? Information is most certainly not king when I just cut off a man's head, attached an arc mine to it, and threw it at his rushing buddies. I'm the king in that scenario. Well, as it turns out, level design that's helpful to stealth is also helpful to this game's medium-range centric combat. Elevation for easy drop assassination kills and quick getaways, and cover to break line of sight and not be shot at too much when trying to engage enemies in melee combat. On the hardest difficulty, Master Assassin, one hit from a sword is pretty much all it takes to do you in, so you'll need to take advantage and have a slightly more tactical approach to combat than you needed in the base game, where enemies are generally in smaller clumps and tighter corridors. You'll really want to be using that high ground and executing slide combo attacks and using things like choke dust and crossbow bolts to stun opponents. Basically, the way that Dishonored's combat is designed, it kind of just works out so long as you keep a steady supply of mana potions, health potions, and ammo, which these levels do. So that being said, we aren't really going to talk about combat much for the rest of this video. The level design lacks its subtle genius when you're going full combat, but it works just fine. Anyways, the Rothwild Slaughterhouse. It's a couple of tight corridors connecting some bigger halls. You're given ample opportunity to take advantage of Blink and get some really crazy spots after being led to them by runes and bone charms. It's a really fun level, but it's kind of the same premise from a gameplay perspective as that outside courtyard, only made more difficult by the claustrophobia of interiors and the higher density of enemies. You scout around using the high ground and you choose which stealth challenges will be worth the risk. We've got some exploration benefits, like finding the shipping crate early so that you have a plan to execute if you intend to get rid of Rothwild, or realizing that you can get that port-side eye of a whale that was mentioned in the Granny Rags recipe by putting this poor whale out of its misery with Sokolov's whale oil stimulation machine. And my personal favorite thing gained from exploring this level, this fantastic audio diary we hear, where Rothwild talks to a captured whale.
What a sad song the old behemoth sings. It looks right at me when I sit here to have my nightcap. Yeah, look at me. A fly next to you, but I'm your master, ain't I?
As I said, it's kind of the same design themes as the exterior, with an escalation in difficulty due to being inside. Watch from above and poke at the world below. We've got a couple of optional objectives and artifacts to provoke more interesting interactions with the enemies below, but this level actually has a lower emphasis on exploration than the exterior, probably because you aren't as free to move around inside as you are outside. So it's really just about raw execution, testing the skills you remembered during your time outside, carrying bodies, seeking extra information before moving forward, remembering little details you picked up on earlier, that sort of stuff. We can either torture Rothwild or Abigail to get the information we need about the Delilah and ship them off to the North Pole, where they can't hurt anyone else, or we can destroy the entire place in a bombastic climax to the mission, which emphasizes how much impact Daud's decisions can have. Then it's just a simple matter of exfiltrating. On our way out, we get one final test. Our blinking is interrupted by an Overseer's music box, stopping our traversal. Looking to the source, we see that Billy Lurk's been captured by Overseers and is being interrogated, her powers muffled by the music box like your own. We can step in and deal with one of the trickier enemies in the game head on, or we can find another way. Sleep darts or a crossbow bolt to the leg will do the trick. Billy can totally handle these guys if they aren't playing their music, but that would be messy. If, instead, you've been experimenting with the tools at hand over the course of the level, you'll realize that the masks you and Billy wear prevent the two of you from being affected by choke dust. You can throw some at these enemies, temporarily stunning and blinding them, and Billy can just teleport away, clean as a whistle. However, if you weren't being super observant way back at the beginning of the level, you'll need to get a bit more hands-on. Look past Billy and you'll see something important. A Weeper corpse. Had you not noticed it earlier, this scene would make sure that it catches your eye, assuming you remember that you were looking for it. But to cleanly grab it now, you'll probably want to knock these two Overseers out with a choke dust sleeping dart combo attack. Either way you slice it, this is a skill that will prove invaluable later on in this DLC, but for now, let's exfiltrate. Thematically, how does this mission tie into Daud's redemption? Well, in classic Dishonored fashion, the choice is up to you. Here it isn't a simple matter of violence or mercy, as it tended to be in the base game. Here it's a matter of degrees. It's about going the extra mile. We can get in and get out of here easily enough. All we have to do is break in, torture the information out of Rothwild or Ames, and leave. However, you can also go the extra mile and destroy the facility, freeing the striking workers to be rehired with better pay and safer conditions than they could have ever hoped for under Rothwild. Or if all of that violence isn't your style and you don't mind missing out on a bit of gold from Ames, you can yank Rothwild out of the torture chair and pack him into a shipping crate intended for Ames and send him packing straight to the farthest reaches of the Isles, where he can't hurt anyone again. As I said, it isn't a matter of choosing how you complete your mission. Hell, you can use violence to achieve a pretty great outcome here. It's just a matter of deciding if getting just what you need is enough, when you could have done more. Next up, we've got the mission that puts the biggest smile on my face, Eminent Domain. Dahlia Timch has a mission for us: eliminate her uncle, Barrister Arnold Timch, and retrieve his mother's will, and she'll tell us who he sold the ship Delilah to. The mission begins with a pretty important little detail. Having played the first game, we already know that our actions have consequences and that the game is paying attention to how violent we're being, but in this beginning section where Lurk either kills or knocks out a guard based on our actions, we see that she specifically is paying attention to our behavior. Anyways, after a typical short linear challenge in which we use a movement-oriented route or a positioning-oriented route to pass over a wall of light, we see 3 whitewashed skulls that signify that we're meant to be meeting Dahlia, and we rescue her from a couple of Hatter Gang goons before she tells us everything we need to know to complete our mission for her. We're going to go through 2 possible routes through this area, as we hit a bit of a fork in the road after rescuing Dahlia. It's also worth noting that the key that we're after will be in a different location, depending on how many people died at the Slaughterhouse. Firstly, moving forward from here, we might end up getting to the trickiest part of this particular map, the Hatter Gang's hideout. The risks here are high, multiple guards below and other guard at our elevation making it more difficult to pass above, and lots of cramped corridors preventing easy movement through the stairwell in this building. Hopefully, by this point you have Void Gaze level 2 and can see the enemies through walls, because otherwise this will be very difficult. Either way, at first glance, you don't really have much cause to stick around. It really is just a couple of goons hiding out in a particularly defensible abandoned hotel. However, it does give us quick access to the streets beyond, and we're able to move through and scale this building, where we're instantly deterred by not 1, but 2 high-elevation guards. This DLC really wants to emphasize that high ground isn't necessarily your playground, as it tended to be in the base game. At this point, you might feel a bit spoiled for choice, being on this huge street, so you cast Void Gaze to pick up a nearby bone charm and find another artifact at the bottom of this drop on the far end of the street. Going down there and collecting your prize isn't tricky, but on your way back, you'll definitely notice the giant gate up on the northeast side of this map. Heading there, it's revealed that the door to the legal district, Timch's place, is locked, and that the captain who took the key is up in the almshouse. Heading over there and eliminating the captain, we see a telltale hat in this room, and a note saying that the Hatters took the key, and we're back to square one. Looks like we have a reason to raid the Hatters hotel now. Upon closer inspection, there's actually a key right here, which is easy enough to grab with some careful timing, either on the key or on the individual guards, but picking up the key reveals that this isn't the one we've been looking for. Instead, a nearby note reveals that it was taken upstairs, and sure enough, if we use some stun mines or carefully blink to get past the guards in the stairwell, we can finally get our hands on the correct key, and get moving towards the legal district. If, however, you have the guts or the indifference to take on the Hatter camp immediately, you'll find this key before you even get to the door. It opens, and with that, the rest of the level becomes your playground, in which you can steal and gather intel to your heart's content before moving on. Anyways, once we get into the legal district, Lurk blinks in to indirectly remind us, not that we needed a reminder, to get off the street and up to the high ground as soon as possible. This prompts us to immediately blink up to this balcony, where we can hear a bone charm whispering to us from the far side of this door. Opening this door, we meet a man who offers us a clean way to eliminate Barrister Timch. All we have to do is move down the street to apartment 7 to read up on the plan, get some necessary tools, as well as our payment in the form of a rune. So here's the plan. Barrister Timch made his fortune by accusing the healthy of being plague-ridden in the form of phony eviction notices and seizing their assets for himself. He also carries a letter of immunity on his person at all times, clearing him of any legal responsibility for false evictions. So we're going to replace his letter of immunity with one of his own phony eviction notices, and here's the kicker, we're going to put something so rancid in his air system that he'll be arrested as a plague victim as soon as the guards catch wind of it. On the way to apartment 10, or maybe afterwards, we can take a moment to meet Billy Lurk on the rooftop she told us about to acquire our stash and some very useful intel. A map of the place, info about Timch's whereabouts, some useful means of ingress, that sort of thing. With all this info, the only excuse for getting lost in this place is a chaotic combat situation. Billy even nabbed us a key to get into the basement where the ventilation system can be tinkered with. And hell, if all of that's too complicated for you and you don't mind spilling a bit of noble blood, you can just snipe Timch through the window here, making this whole job a lot simpler with one quick squeeze of the trigger. Although you will want to get close ahead of time to make sure that the facade doors are open.
A true shot. It's a shame you still have to go inside and find the will. We could just go back to Red Shore otherwise.
Anyways, if that isn't your style, we can do things the more subtle way. Sneak up behind Timch and sit through this sickening dialogue in which he resorts to threats to get his way with the maid. So, turns out it's completely random which conversation you get from Barrister Timch. I've been grinding for that conversation for about an hour and a half, but it is 7 p.m. on a Sunday and I just do not have any more time to keep trying to get this conversation. Rest assured he says some absolutely despicable stuff to his employee. And if you can avoid pulling out your sword then and there, you'll have a couple of pretty good opportunities to replace his letter of immunity with your own eviction notice. Then it's just a simple matter of getting to the basement with the key that Lurk stole for you and putting the sack inside his ventilation system, then simply watch the plot unfold.
And if I or any of my men contract the plague because of this visit, I'll see that your head rolls.
No. This isn't the right document. This...
Get him out of here before he starts bleeding from the eyes. And secure this court. It's under quarantine.
Yes, sir.
Boy, is this fate deserved. Seriously, Timch is even worse than this guy, and to be served one of the same bunk eviction notices he handed out to so many innocent people is the most poetic non-lethal elimination in the series as far as I'm concerned. Anyways, your exfiltration is simple enough. The location of a rune in apartment 10 probably already nudged you in the direction of an easy exit route, so now it's just time to reflect on what just happened while we make our way back to Dahlia. Having already reacquainted the player with their essential Dishonored skills in the first mission of this DLC, the second mission is free to explore some other ideas that weren't really present in the base game to this degree. This mission has two key elements in my eye. Firstly, the scavenger hunt aspect. The way that Daud has to go all over the place following clues to find the key is a great setup for this mission, which, combined with Lurk's extensive intel on Timch, paints a picture of a man who's all about acquiring as much information as he can before executing a plan. It paints a picture of a man who wants to clean up his act and start doing things in a more subtle way. Somebody who wants to be a force impacting the trajectory of Dunwall, rather than a boogeyman that parents will tell stories about to frighten their kids. However, the inverse of that is the second element of this level, Timch. As we learn throughout our exploration of this level, Timch has everything figured out too. He's got a great little setup using bunk bureaucracy to effectively steal from the frightened and downtrodden, keeping his own mother in an elusive state, claiming her will as his own, all so that he can give the spoils away to a woman that's taking advantage of him. As evil as this man is, the setup he's made for himself is ingenious. This parallel between Daud and Timch begs the question, what is it exactly that Daud wants to save? Is he trying to save Dunwall from going over the edge, or is he trying to save himself from the same? Is he trying to save the city from the knife of Dunwall, or is he trying to save himself from it? The fact that Timch's niece, Dahlia, betrayed him for his selfish actions is also pretty important and relevant to a greedier Daud, as we'll see in a moment. Mission 3 has an interesting set of challenges. It needs to provide a satisfying endpoint to the Knife of Dunwall while still leading us with plot threads to hang on to in the follow-up DLC, The Brigmore Witches. It needs to make an environment we've already played through in the base game, Daud's hideout, feel fresh. And lastly, it needs to act as a general test of our success in adapting to Daud's new abilities and items, or if nothing else, one of our general willingness to take as many opportunities as we can. We'll handle the narrative side of things for later. For now, let's just get straight to those two game design challenges. How does this level make an environment we've already been in feel fresh, and how does it act as a final test of our skills? They actually share the same answer: enemies. It's actually a pretty clever trick they've pulled. Anyone who's played this DLC has supposedly played through the base game at least twice, one run for low chaos, one run for high chaos. So on the gameplay side of things, the player already knows the area, and on the narrative side of things, it's Daud's hideout, so of course he knows the area too. In terms of gameplay though, both the player and Daud's understanding of the area has been flipped on its head with the presence of a squad of overseers that have taken the area over. Only Daud is able to free his captured apprentices, and stop the overseer's assault on his home in its tracks. This whole area is about as vertical as anything else in the game. When going up against Daud's assassins in the base game, that verticality only enhances their ability to guard the area, as they can blink all around. Fighting overseers, however, well, an area like this is our element, and it sure isn't theirs. They're the toughest common enemies in the game, but they can't blink, and so we only ever have to fight a few of them at a time. However, they're also armed with music boxes which sap our powers, meaning we'll need to rely on Daud's raw human skills if we want to go through this with an all-out assault playstyle. Crossbow bolts to the legs to stun the music box wielders, giving us the split second we need to blink behind and go in for the kill. Arc mines around corners when enemies are chasing you, catching enemy grenades and throwing them back. You'll have to really bring your best foot forward to do well in combat here, as should be the case in any final mission. Doing things stealthily and less violently, however, that's where things get even more interesting. Remember back in the first mission, I emphasized that a well-thrown choke dust was enough to free Billy Lurk from the music box's hold on her, enabling her to blink away? Well, that isn't going to work here. See, our assassins' hands are bound. They can't blink away. What this means is that we're either going to have to burn through tons of mana casting bend time in order to free our princesses non-violently, or we're going to have to take these guys out in some other way. A combination of choke dust and trank rounds should work, or maybe we can attach a stun mine to some sort of throwable object and knock them out in bulk that way. making sure to use choke dust to keep them from calling for help. Maybe we could time it perfectly and choke them out with our bare hands, but that's going to be a tough one. We could also create a distraction and free our soldiers while the enemy isn't looking, but that isn't going to work in some situations. No, any way you slice it, whether it's mana, choke dust, trank rounds, or stun mines, doing this stealthily and non-lethally is going to be a test of the resources we've accrued and preserved over the course of the previous 2 missions. If you've been frugal and collecting all the money you can, you'll have no problem going into this mission with maxed out equipment and mana, and freeing your men will be more or less trivial so long as you think things over first. But if you've been less frugal and are low on resources, you'll need to find those resources for yourself. Therein lies another home field advantage that Daud has, which Corvo didn't when he went through this area. He's got his key on him from the get-go. Littered all over this place are stashes of equipment that Daud can open up. It's just a matter of actually getting to them. Some of them are easy, like this stash at the top of the chain in the beginning, with a choke dust and an explosive dart in it, both incredibly helpful. Most, however, will require you to go a bit out of your way. You're often led to these stashes with bone charms and runes, which serve the double function of pointing you towards important objectives, like the Overseer's base of operations, in which Daud can learn the enemy's plan, and infer that somebody in his own ranks must have leaked their location to the Overseers. Anyways, we worm our way through the familiar interior and exterior, with some previous obstacles removed and some new ones, such as the music boxes, added. We eliminate the Overseer's commander, we break into their FOB to gather intel, and most importantly, we free our men by any means necessary, and then it's time for our final judgment. If you've been adding to the chaos, creating more bodies to feed the rat plague, and generally taking the easier, less patient route, then one thing is clear: Daud isn't trying to save Dunwall. He's going after Delilah to try and save himself. He may have been shaken by Corvo's look after the death of the Empress, but on playthrough like this, his actions show that he didn't learn a thing. He's still being just as selfish as he always was, only this time his target is someone who's genuinely evil. If, however, Daud shows more of a commitment to helping the people of Dunwall rather than just ruthlessly following leads, well, maybe Billy Lurk was wrong about him. Lurk is the one who sold Daud's gang out to the Overseers. She was the rat, and if you prove her right that you have lost your way, she'll happily fight you to the death and stand by Delilah over your corpse. If, however, you prove that she was wrong about you, she simply offers you her sword and her life, and the choice is in your hands. Slit her throat or banish her from Dunwall. Giving her her life, she simply blinks away without words, never to be seen again. Daud will always work from the shadows. The world will never truly know what he did and did not do. His redemption in the eyes of history is impossible. However, that's not what this was about. This is about going after somebody even more dangerous than he is. This is about taking down Delilah before Corvo takes you down.
It's been months since I killed the Empress, but it feels like only seconds ago I heard her yelling for her daughter, Emily. Corvo's face going slack with shock, and somewhere in my head the outsiders laugh. Corvo, here to settle our debt. You understand, I won't make this easy for you. Damn it, sir.
As always, before I see you guys off for the day, I'd like to verbally thank my patrons for supporting me. I'd especially like to thank those who are donating $10 or more monthly, such as Ahoy Buoy Polly K, Alex Vanderwood, Almost Dead Again, Anatoly Volnov, Andrew Melnick, Arthur D. Gonzalez Martin, Big Time Jim, Colin Gajic, Cooper Sutton, Koss, Cosmo Borski, Daniel Christman, Darius Fazier, David Kaiser, Duncan Bristow, Fralum, In Bloom, Jack Eisenberg, Jano, J.O., John Strange, J.P., J.W., Max Binning, Mello, Mixer Rules, Money and Muses, Patio Furniture, CeeLo, Silver Silence, Wolf HD, and Young Master Pig. I have worked my ass off getting this video out on time. I really wasn't expecting the script to turn out to be as long as it was, and even now it's 2:30 a.m. before the Monday this is meant to go live, and I don't know if I'm gonna add music to this thing or just let the ambient noise do its thing. So thanks for all the love and support on last week's video. It really did help motivate me to get this thing done, although that being said, crunch is unhealthy and you should not do it. Anyways, have a good day, guys.